In this video, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the things that you want to consider before you actually make your first investment. Investing is a big deal, and getting it right is really important because no one wants to invest with the goal of losing money. Everybody wants to make money. So before you get into investing, the first thing that you want to do is actually define your objectives. Some people call these goals. It's a little bit of cliche, I guess, when it comes to the investing world. I just say, what's the point? What are we doing here? Are you saving money for your first house, to go on a vacation? Are you hoping to retire someday? Is this financial independence, and however you define that? Knowing what the point is every time you invest a new dollar really matters. The reason that your objective is important to know in advance is that it defines the mode of transportation you're going to take to get there. Let's use a real world example. If you wanted to go to Paris, you wouldn't put on the running shoes and jog over there. If you wanted to go check the mail, you wouldn't buy a plane ticket. It's ridiculous, I know. But when you're investing for a short-term purpose, like something over the next 3 months to a year, you don't want to invest in something that is a better tool for a very long-term investment. Setting your objectives or your goals, or however you want to define it, will help you with your investing strategy. And there could be many things that you consider, but I'm going to tell you about two. The first one is that it's going to tell you the plan type that is most appropriate for you. So if you're saving for your first house, maybe the First Home Savings Account, or FHSA, would be the best tool for you. If you're planning for retirement and you're a high-income person, perhaps a registered retirement savings plan or an RRSP would be good. If it's for your child's education, it's an RESP, and Registered Education Savings Plan. A TFSA is a good catch-all plan type that allows your investments to grow on a tax-free basis, and there's no penalties or restrictions on withdrawing the money. All of these plans come with some pros and cons, and one might be better than the other for determining your actual best tool to meet your objective. The second thing that knowing your objective will do is it'll help you pick the investments that are appropriate for you. So again, if you have something that's short-term, aiming for something that's low risk makes a lot more sense. If it's something that's long-term, adding some risk might make sense for you in that case. But having a very risky investment for a very short-term goal creates this imbalance between the tools and the timeline. Let's talk about short-term goals for a second. And some of those things might be as short as next month, a few months from now, maybe a vacation later this year. Maybe it's a car you need next year. Maybe it's something that's even undefined, like an emergency fund. These would be things where you would want very little risk. I would say no risk or little risk, because flexibility is key. You want to be able to spend this money, and especially because it's a short-term goal, you probably have a really good idea of how much you need to spend. And so adding risk creates an opportunity for that to actually decline in value. And so if you know you need to spend $20,000, if you end up with $19,500, you'd be really disappointed. But if you end up with $20,500, you probably don't really care that much, right? So the upside potential over a short period of time isn't worth it. The juice isn't worth the squeeze. So when you're aiming for a short-term goal, consider things like cash, money market funds, high interest savings account. GICs could be a tool that you could use if you have a known dollar amount that you need over a known time frame. The reason GICs are a little bit more specific is that they require your money to be locked in for that period of time, and to access your money before that period is over requires a penalty to be paid if they'll let you do it at all. When it comes to short-term goals, the thing that really makes the biggest difference is your savings rate. You're not going to be able to invest your way to a short-term goal without getting lucky, winning the lottery, these types of things that are closer to gambling than actual prudent financial planning. So when it comes to a short-term goal, make sure that you're able to save enough to be able to do it, and any interest or investment growth that you get from a low or no risk type of investment, think of it like gravy. It's the icing on the cake. Looking at something like a long-term goal like retirement or financial independence, being able to quit your job someday, whatever you want to call it, introducing some investment risk will allow your investments to help a little bit more than just your savings rate alone. In the early years, your savings rate is going to do all of the heavy lifting, but later on, once you've built up a big enough nest egg, then your investments will be able to grow and make you more money than you could ever save on your own. Over time, Your investments will become the main driver of your outcomes. However, over a short period of time, even with a long-term investment, you're going to see some very different outcomes. And so let me show you exactly what I mean by that. On this chart here, over on the left side, you'll see the different outcomes over a 1-year period. This goes back to 1950 all the way to the end of 2023. The green bar represents the stock market. This is the US stock market, but it's a good enough example for you to understand kind of what's going on. On the far left side shows 1-year returns. So the best year and the worst year, this is for the S&P 500. And so in the best case, it was up 47%, but in the worst case, it was down 39%. So if you're using the S&P 500 or any equivalent stock portfolio as a short-term tool, there is a chance that you could make a good amount of money for sure, but there's also a chance that you could lose nearly half of your money by investing here. Now, what happens when we start extending the timeline from the holding period? So if you look at the bottom, it says 5-year rolling. So looking over at the next column. So again, the stock market's in green. The best outcome for a 5-year period ever for the US stock market was 28%, but the worst period of time on an annualized basis was -3. So again, when I said the term short-term for a goal and long-term, 5 years is kind of still in that range of time where it is possible to lose money over that period. And so investing in the stock market for a goal of 5 years or less adds some risk for sure. Less than 1 year, but you can see where I'm coming from. Now jump over to the far end on the 20-year rolling period. Now, the range of possible outcomes over a 20-year period shrinks, and now we're in the positives. And so this is why people recommend using stocks for a long-term investment, because the longer you hold them, the less volatile the eventual outcome is going to be. Yeah, there's been some times where the returns haven't been that great. In this case, 6% per year for 20 years. It's not really that bad, actually, if you compound that out per year over 20 years. However, 17% per year would be a lot nicer. So the risk-reward trade-off is something that needs to be evaluated when you make an investment, and the longer you hold an investment for, the better your chances your outcomes will end up on the positive side. If we go back to this chart again, introducing some bonds into a portfolio, so going from all stocks to some bonds, that's the gray portion where it says 60-40 portfolio. That would be 60% stocks, 40% bonds. Historically speaking, the periods of time where you end up with a positive return, it shrinks down. So even on a 5-year basis, there has not been a 5-year period of time since 1950 where we've seen a portfolio like this be negative over a 5-year period. Again, you have to stay in your seat for the whole 5-year period, or else getting in, getting out, getting in, getting out, that actually increases your odds of getting it wrong and then ending up with a negative return as a result. So these are not guarantees by any means. However, this is just historical returns over the last 73 years. The point that I'm trying to make is that the more aggressive you are, the longer you need to hold it to increase your odds of success with that investment. The upside potential with a conservative investment obviously is much lower. This is the idea of the risk-reward trade-off. But in any given year, the more risk you have, the more chances you have of ending up with a negative outcome. So be very, very careful when you're investing your money, because you need to know what the point is and what your timeline is. Understanding your investment goals and aligning them with a specific strategy for plan type and the investments that you end up purchasing is really critical to making sure that you have financial success over the short term and the long term. If you like content like this, you might like my podcast, The Canadian Money Roadmap. You can find that in my channel here. It's in audio format, or you can find me on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or anywhere else you listen to podcasts. I've got over 100 episodes that you can go back into over the last few years, and I'm sure you'll find something that's helpful for you when you're getting started on your financial journey, or if you're pretty far along and you're looking for something to improve your financial picture for whatever stage of life you're at. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you again.